So UFC 321 ended in tragedy, and we're still kind of fresh off everything that unfolded. This was supposed to be the event that really answered a lot of the questions that we had about UFC's heavyweight division, a lot of the controversies that's been going on, a lot of the storylines that's been playing out regarding the division for some time now. And we basically ended with just more questions than we did answers. However, we've had a little bit of time unfold now since that initial incident, and I think we all have one big question on our mind right now. So what's next? Well, I basically took a look at everything. I've analyzed some stuff. Basically, want to get into my breakdown of how I see things unfolding from this point on regarding the division. As far as this entire division is concerned, and this entire incident, basically Cyril Gahn deeply eye-poked Tom Aspinall, leading to the fight being ended in a no contest. Right now, due to the results of this, I'd probably say that there's four major people who are affected by this situation. Those people would be Tom Aspinall, Cyril Gahn, Alex Pereira, and John Bones Jones. To get into it, let's start with Tom Aspinall, the current UFC heavyweight champion, the guy, the person who a lot of people, including myself to be honest, kind of see as the future of the heavyweight division, as well as a new generation of heavyweight. This new generation isn't going to be what we've historically known the heavyweight division to be across organizations. We've been familiar with heavyweights being kind of just fat men who can punch hard, not really knowing them for a lot of their technical skills. The ones who do have those kind of known technical skills tend to be the ones who turned out to become the greats. People like Stipe, people like Cain Velasquez, like those are the type of people who, historically speaking, we kind of recognize for become the greats because of the anomalies. Even somebody like DC, like they can move a lot better. They tend to have a lot more of the softer skills, a lot better things than just a big punch. However, even with all of that being said, Aspinall's kind of seen as a step above that. His movement is incredible. That we all consider, always say he moves like a middleweight. He has never before seen speed, but with this incident, we got a lot of legacy at stake for him. Following the John Jones saga, a lot of us who kind of were split between two camps. Those of us who believe that Aspinall was that guy, like never before seen generational talent and potential for the future of the division. And then those of us who thought he was just an overhyped job, who could never live up to all this hype and wasn't even nowhere near as skilled as people claim. When you look at the camp that believed him to be greatest heavyweight of all time potentially, people were saying that he had the boxing of Stipe, the wrestling or grappling capability that even if it's not as renowned as DC's, within the heavyweight division, it's overwhelmingly dominant. He had power comparable to Ngannou's as far as how he switched people out. Literally had the shortest fight time of UFC history recorded, 100% knockout finish rate of all his opponents that he's gone against and won against. And with the level of his hand speed, literally incomparable to anybody we've seen so far. He's considered to be the leader of this new generation of heavyweights by a lot of people's aspects. But following this eye poke incident, a lot of people looking at it and the people are really questioning the legitimacy of the fight ending sequence. A lot of people, everyone acknowledges the eye poke. We all saw it. The reality is that it was deep, it was bad. But was it bad enough to end the fight? Was it bad enough to end a heavyweight fight that's meant to answer a lot of questions? Things weren't really looking too hot for Aspinall in the beginning. First time he's ever bled in the cage. He seemed to have been getting really kind of out technicaled by Cyril Gahn in some of the finer instances. It was a back and forth fight It wasn't as one-sided as some people try to make it appear. However, I think we can all admit that if we're being objective, it was very clear that he was on the losing side of those exchanges. So a lot of people are questioning, did he look for an out? Did Big Tom Aspinall turn into Crybaby Aspinall? Just based off that little sign of adversity, did he take the first chance he had and ran with it? You have instances like DC's eye poke that he still fought through when he went against Stipe. Even Stipe himself, when he had gotten eye poked by DC in their first match and kept going, a lot of people are questioning the heart of Aspinall in this instance. And not to mention that just recently, before the fight, his dad was considering and talking about publicly about how he actually wanted to get out of MMA and out of the UFC once their contract was over and get into boxing for a higher paycheck and more money and bigger opportunities. Is Aspinall not committed, or is he just genuinely not the hype job that a lot of people thought he once was? But moving on to the next member of these four, the four individuals affected by this results, we have Cyril Gahn. Cyril Gahn, prior to Aspinall's rise to fame, rather than before Aspinall became the guy, that guy was supposed to be Cyril Gahn. Cyril Gahn is the man who gave Francis Ngannou his toughest fight. A lot of people argue that Gahn is the one who actually should have won that exchange between the two of them. Gahn's got undoubtedly the best footwork in the entire heavyweight division. Gahn, like Aspinall, was considered to be one of the spearheads of the newer generation of heavyweight, even prior to Aspinall. Gahn was the one who didn't look fat, didn't look blobby. He was an actual natural heavyweight, like retained his form, retained his athleticism, never before seen overall just technical skills. While his pure hand speed isn't as fast as Aspinall's, his footwork is much superior in a lot of people's opinions, and his has a renowned kickboxer. His his switching up of his weapons, his timing, his understanding of the game, all of it was revolutionary for the heavyweight division. And we saw a lot of this on showcase in this matchup against Tom. Despite having similar strike count, Gahn was the one who was getting better of most of the exchanges. Even though they both connected, Gahn was the one who avoided a lot of Aspinall's power shots in that short time period of the first round. Gahn, the first man in the entire UFC to draw blood from Aspinall. Gahn was the one who was landing more accurately. Gahn was the one who seemed to be overall more comfortable in there. But now that doesn't also discredit the fact that Gahn's also the one who committed the eye poke. And then even on that, Gahn was considered to be the first real test of Aspinall's career. Gahn was believed to be the one to really determine whether or not Aspinall is what a lot of people say he was. While Aspinall has had tests before that a lot of people wanted to see him against, such as Curtis Blades and even Sergey Pavlovich before that, but Gahn, who was seen by a lot of people prior to his John Jones confrontation as the heir apparent to the UFC's heavyweight division, as the next in line, as the champion, to the person who is who's supposed to be the champion. A lot of people, especially after he got steamrolled by John Jones, and then once again after his most recent performance against Volkov, a lot of people kind of wrote Gahn off and just expected him to kind of get completely outclassed and flushed in this fight. A lot of people ended it to end within the first 2 to 3 minutes. However, that wasn't what happened. Gahn put on a show in the short time the fight lasted, catching Aspinall off guard, having the better timing, having the better understanding of range in this entire matchup. He was the one who was a lot more defense conscious. And even when he was getting caught, he recovered well. He stopped the takedown, showed a lot of much improvement and an excellent game plan so far. But the fight ended shortly. A lot of people also reference in the fights post events. A lot of people reference to Ghan's history of committing fouls, and even quoted some of his team members like Nasruddin Imavov and their constant history of constantly fouling in their fights. A lot of people have kind of split into two camps regarding Ghan. A lot of people, some people believe that he was completely piecing up Aspinall and made him quit. Then there's other people who are really looking at it and just calling him a dirty fighter and a dirty cheat, and just saying that he just wanted the easiest way out, and he just went a little bit too far and ended up sabotaging his own opportunity. We know that Dana White has confirmed that the rematch is next, but how long is that rematch going to take? Is it going to be before the end of the year? Is it going to be much longer? That timeline is still to be determined. But for right now, Ghan is kind of once again in a limbo state, as he does seem to always find himself throughout the course of his career. Next person, Alex Pereira. Somebody who a lot of people consider to already be a Hall of Fame caliber opponent. Already a first ballot UFC Hall of Famer in the making in a lot of people's eyes. Somebody who a lot of people consider to be the potential greatest of all time, the GOAT of the sport in the making. Somebody who got 2 division championships within the course of 2 years, being so new to MMA and the UFC, to rise into prominence in such a dominant and active fashion as he has. Already had his eyes set on heavyweight for some time ago. Initially, there was interest in him fighting Tom before either of them fully solidified their position to the point it was. However, now that interest has shifted to John Jones. A lot more interest in the quote unquote big money fight, the determining for the true quote unquote GOAT of the sport. We also saw Pereira's reaction to Aspinall's eye poke. You kind of see that there isn't really much. He doesn't have that level of interest in Tom right now. He isn't really interested in the actual title for the heavyweight division right now. He's more interested in getting to Jones, getting that money fight, and then kind of trying to cement his legacy through that way if necessary. A lot of people see him in 3 camps himself. The 3 narratives with him are: a lot of people believe that he should fight Tom Aspinall instead of Ghan or instead of Jones. And then after that, a lot of people believe that there's also the camp that believes instead of fighting against Jones, instead of fighting against Aspinall, my apologies, he should fight against Jones. They believe that that's the real fight, that's the real interest fight. There would be a larger amount of people who are curious about that result. Of that same camp, there's also those who believe that that would basically just be a gimmick. Myself included, to be honest, be a gimmick fight, a fight that he'd practically get outclassed by Jones due to the grappling weakness and just be finished, similarly to how Cyril Gane himself was in his matchup against Jones. However, with his recent performance against Ankalaev, there's a lot more believers, a lot more faith in the capabilities of Alex Pereira, as well as the rate and speed of his development. But then the third camp, outside of those two, outside of those who believe he should fight Aspinall and those who believe he should fight Jones, there is the reality that there is an already preset determined number 1 contender for Alex Pereira's current division in which he is champion of, and that's Carlos Ulberg, teammate of his former rival Israel Adesanya, somebody who has done things the hard way. He's gone up the route, he's gone up the road, he's done everything he needed, took fights that arguably were unnecessary just to solidify his position. He is the next in line, and we all know that. The question that everyone is having is, he should focus on Ulberg now or later? A lot of people believe that if Pereira moves up to the heavyweight division, he'll vacate his title. In that aspect, this third group would have their questions answered, and they wouldn't have to worry about him facing Olberg, because Olberg would then be able to compete for the title against a different opponent. Even though I know a lot of people view that as ducking, but I believe most people would view it as him just him moving up to a bigger, brighter financial incentive. As for Olberg, the matchup is interesting, but I believe that a lot of people right now, the majority, is against Olberg in that case. However, if there's one thing that we've learned about the Aspinall versus Gane situation, it's that just being the matchmaking and just because the majority believes that it'll be an easy victory doesn't mean that's what reality is going to be. I personally think it would be an interesting stylistic matchup to see how those two pit against each other. I ultimately believe that Pereira would win that exchange. However, people, these are the three camps regarding Pereira in this situation. Those who believe that he should go against Aspinall, those who believe he should go against Jones, and those who believe he should focus on his own division. Solidify it one last time against Ulberg, the certified number one contender, and then you're free to move up and do whatever you want. I remember that Dana White himself has also been very much a proponent and believer in Alex Pereira staying in his own division instead of moving up to heavyweight, at least for now. But moving on to the last person of this quartet, we have John Bones Jones, the quote unquote MMA GOAT, the person a lot of people believe to be the greatest of all time in combat sports ever. In mixed martial arts, the uncontested, undefeated, despite his record having that one DQ loss, the person who a lot of people believe is the ultimate fighter that's ever existed and ever will exist. John Jones had a recent saga when prior to him vacating his heavyweight title, Tom Aspinall was the certified interim champion and number one contender. John Jones spent a lot of time avoiding, delaying, and ignoring that matchup, kind of strung them along, dragged them along in a lot of cases, and created a lot of sour taste in a lot of the mouths of fans. Eventually, he elicited to abandon the alleged large sum of money he was offered in order to create the fight by the organization, and elicited to retire, albeit very temporarily. In this instance, after the announcement of the White House card, he's shown incredible interest in that fight. Somebody who, because of his defeat in Cyril Gane in a short time period, under a round, then a lot of people kind of added that as a condition in order for Aspinall to have even been worthy of the matchup, that he himself beat had to beat Gane either comparably or superior to what Jones did. That obviously did not happen. I personally think that's an outrageous expectation due to the quality of Gane as a fighter. However, based off that alleged assumption, Jones himself has also played into it a lot. He's been very dismissive of Aspinall as a caliber opponent, as somebody worthy of fighting him. And now, especially after how this fight ended between Aspinall and Gane, Jones has actually doubled down and teamed up with Alex Pereira in trying to push that fight and dictate that as a demand. We saw Alex Pereira post on social media that he wants to fight Jones at heavyweight, and that should be the focus for heavyweight. And then we also saw Jones respond in full support of that statement. If you're able to generate enough interest, especially with Pereira being one of the darlings of the UFC currently, and Jones having been one of the former darlings, despite kind of always frustrating the organization, there's always that chance of him kind of forcing and kind of creating that incident, albeit not right now. There's also narratives regarding Jones. There's people who believe that he ducked Aspinall, including myself. They believe that Aspinall, when he was the rightful contender, Jones avoided him out of fear of a loss. However, since following the results of this incident, there's a lot of people who have kind of abandoned that narrative. And right now, the narrative you're seeing even more is that if he struggled with Gane, he'd lose and get killed by Jones. That's kind of what the narrative a lot of people are pushing. Very unrealistic. Even when you look at certain things, like we watched a much younger, better version of John Jones struggle against Dominic Reyes, and then we watched that same Dominic Reyes get finished by multiple other opponents. And that quite easily was, it could be argued, would not compare to even a Cyril Gane. So, as we always say, MMA math doesn't work. But at the end of the day, we're all fans, and we understand that people's biases will come out and people's arguments will become very biased in favor of their fighters and the team that they support. Right now, a lot of people think that if Aspinall had fought Jones, hysterically, people consider Jones the quote unquote eye poke king. So they say that if that's what Gane did, imagine what Jones would have done. Where also a lot of people also believe that this performance just shows the difference in class between Aspinall and Jones. So, moving on, what is the conclusion? What is next following this whole incident? My conclusion, we've already got confirmed by Dana White that next up for the heavyweight is Aspinall versus Gane 2. I believe the rematch is going to be a lot more anticipated than this fight was. A lot of people kind of expected that this would have been a blowout. A lot of people believe that Cyril Gane was undeserving of this opportunity, as he should have lost in his outing against Alexander Volkov. A lot of people believe that this should have been kind of just a solidifying of Tom's legacy, the true start for the era that Tom Aspinall would dominate. That did not happen, and the rematch is now a lot more anticipated. A lot of people are now really curious to see, is Aspinall actually the guy that we all thought and claimed he was, or is Gane the Gane that we once thought would have dominated the division? Is he the one who was about to completely outclass him? And despite all of this, we have John Jones' shadow in the background as the person who dominated Gane. Is it a confirmation that it's not that Jones was scared of Aspinall? He really and truly was just that unworthy of him and undeserving of an opportunity against the MMA and UFC GOAT, greatest of all fighter to ever exist. Right now, we see that Volkov won his match against Jelton Almeida. That is, without a doubt, the next fight up for the winner of Aspinall versus Gane. That is the official number one contender for heavyweight division. However, that can be leapfrogged by Alex Pereira, if he ends up winning his next outing. I find it very unlikely that Alex Pereira is never going to fight again prior to Tom Aspinall winning against Cyril Gane and fighting against Volkov. That's an unlikely result, especially with how busy he's historically been. If Aspen, as far as I see it with Pereira, he's either going to get that matchup against Jones, which is very unlikely, seeing as the UFC is very opposed to John Jones right now, based off all his antics and shenanigans. Either Alex Pereira will get that matchup against Jones, or Pereira will defend his belt, especially under the new Paramount deal against Carlos Olberg. And then after that, his next move will be made clear. I believe that regardless of who wins in this heads-up match against in between Aspinall and Gane, Volkov will be next in line. He can only be leapfrogged by Pereira, who is able to force the organization to adhere to his desires based off the overwhelming support and interest he's garnered himself. This is really the only two outcomes that we see. It is overall better for the UFC division for Tom Aspinall to win this matchup. because it would be the UFC's way to kind of wash away some of the shame that was accompanied by this entire saga following John Jones and kind of how he got strung along. He strung along the entire organization and Dana White. If Gon wins, there's always going to be that thought process of the real heavyweight champ, the real unofficial champ is John Jones. Despite there being no continuous legacy and leniency of the heavyweight championship within the UFC prior to Francis Ngannou. With Francis Ngannou leaving undefeated when he had the title, then the vacant title being competed for between Jones and Gane, then that saga with Jones never truly defending his title against the top contender, and then after that, with after beating Gane, and then after that, now with this whole incident, if Gane comes back and beats Aspinall despite everything, we will always, all of us will always consider that Jones is the real champion. And then if they have that quote unquote gimmick fight with Aspinall versus Pereira, while that will be a big money fight, it will, without a doubt, undoubtedly trivialize the UFC's heavyweight division and call everything into question. But let's see what happens. We're in a new era. Let's see who comes out on top. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, peace.